if you want to scale, here's an easy way to do it. So that was part of the reason that I had gone to that midterm rental summit, was to talk about that. I don't know if I've quite perfected that sales pitch yet, because I think I still got a lot of like glazed over looks. But I think there are some operators that are looking at some really big contracts that are furniture rental. Makes a lot of sense, where if you want to do 300, 500, 900 doors, furniture rental could be a good solution for that. What started me going down this path of trying to figure out what midterm rentals was is because I wanted to see if there was an opportunity for us to get in front of this and show opportunities to scale in a different way than probably what people are doing right now.
Who's this? Oh, you're an entrepreneur? Oh, you're a real estate investor. Oh, you're trying to learn from those who did it. Well, come into the lab then. Put your white coat on, gloves on, notepad, and let's build, y'all.
Experiment Nation, in this episode, I had the pleasure of having a true founding member of not only a company that was in the furnished rentals sector for furnished accommodations, so that being its own entity, but then going into the corporate housing entity, and now also going into the on-demand furnished housing, uh, all within one umbrella. And the reason I highlight this, it's important. We call it midterm rentals, uh, and they're calling it temporary housing, and they've been doing it for quite some time. So having someone step into the lab who's not only, again, talking the talk, but actually walking the walk. And I do believe if you're going to follow someone who's walking the walk, it's important to also see how long they've been walking for. And this gentleman that comes into the lab has been doing this since the times since the 90s. I mean, I don't mean to age myself, but listen, I was a little baby boy when this gentleman and his corporation were doing the things that we're doing. So I think with that said, and having 3 decades under my belt of just life, having someone who's been doing that for that long, it's sometimes good to move aside and hear it from them, because the midterm rental world that we hear was very new. And there's a lot of new operators, but it's great to hear how some of these operators have been doing it since day one and doing it at scale. We're talking about thousands of units of control, working with supplier networks, working with, again, furnish the networks, or companies like the one that he's a part of. So in this episode, Gabriel Wacker, from, again, the sales and marketing, vice president of sales and marketing of Transitions Group, which then also used to formerly be ExecuStay Midwest and Furniture Options. Now the ExecuStay, what's interesting was the ExecuStay of Marriott, and then Oakwood bought the ExecuStay that Marriott had bought, and then that's how the connection of those two names kind of fall underneath that umbrella, which kind of just shows you how interconnected these industries are, but how big the players are in this space, because Marriott isn't just buying anybody. And Oakwood, the true in the beginning of corporate housing, also saw the value in this. So when there's value, there's also dollars on the other side. And if you're driven by dollars, if you're driven by corporate, if you're also driven to understand how that insurance housing kind of falls into the play and how they've been around for so long, which is what has helped be a big, again, slice of the revenue that, again, a furnished company, a furnished rental company operates on. It just goes to show you how deep these roots in insurance housing, as well as other relocation opportunities, all under the umbrella of temporary housing. So if you want to understand where history all started and how it all is interconnected today, and why it's not a fad and something that will last, with the trials and tribulations and challenges that faces just like any other industry, this isn't one that is going away anytime soon. It is a sounded industry that you can lay your foundation on. Tune into this episode. You will not be disappointed, because there is history, and behind history is what we call receipts, and behind receipts is some revenue, and behind revenue is an opportunity for you to continue to serve. On that note, Gabriel Wacker. Experiment Nation, I am excited for this guest who we recently had a chance to connect while we were in person on the midterm rental summit weekend. We actually had one of our own events. And what I find fascinating is that in this industry, I believe it's now 3 degrees of separation. Everybody is interconnected, but every time I either host one of these events or I attend one of these events, you kind of realize that the layers are very deep, and there's multiple layers, and there's individuals like the guest I'm about to introduce today that has deep roots, and as humble as he is, he comes from again a deep rooted foundation before midterm rentals was actually a word that we use and made cool. It comes from a foundational real estate approach where of temporary housing that is rooted and from again understanding the fundamentals of corporate housing. So, with that said, I have the pleasure today of having Gabriel Wacker from the Vice President and Sales Marketing of Transitions Group. And with that comes a lot of history behind corporate housing, what we call midterm rentals, what some might call uh, rental arbitrage, all of the above. Today, we can dive in deep because, of course, we have a gentleman who's been doing this for decades here with us. So, without further ado, Gabriel, how's it going today? How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And you're dialing in from OKC today,
OKC,
which is
home of the Thunder, soon to be NBA champions, I think.
oh, he's calling it on the air. That's very interesting. So, yeah, it's good to have you here. And like I gotta say, I'm grateful that you were able to be part of our event when we last connected this past month. Time is flying. Uh, but I'm just so curious and interested in your background because uh, when I say you're an OG, I mean that in the sense that, we're calling things one thing, but, I have someone here in front of me who's been doing it for quite some time and you've seen it in a lot of different ways. And think one of the things we talked about as well, and maybe you can kind of give us some background, is that you were there from the very jump of a company that has a furnished a kind of furnished rental arm, but then temporary housing. And then one word that you had used at the time was it's funny at the time I think you said on demand
Yeah.
rentals, which is all new words, but again, maybe some of the same fundamentals. What I need to ask you, if you introduce yourself the way we introduced ourselves a couple weeks back, how do you introduce yourself to people? What is it that you do? And then when we get to that, I want to also hear how did you feel the midterm rentals slash temporary housing world is, if not the same and different from one another. So why don't we start there? Who are you, and how do you even introduce yourself? What do you do? And let's go from there.
Yeah, Gabriel Wacker, obviously with Transitions Group, and I always feel like the name, our parent company's name, kind of describes what we do. So anybody that's in transition, whether they
Mm,
need furniture rental or month-to-month rentals, corporate housing, midterm rentals, real estate, anything like that, somebody's in transition, that's what we try to be a solution for. So obviously we have a corporate housing division, we do a furniture rental, we have a furniture rental division. Um, I oversee the sales and marketing for all those divisions, and that's we're pretty much helping people that are in transition in their lives, whether it's um, corporate housing or temporary rental or midterm rental, whatever you want to call it. It's pretty much the same thing.
that's fascinating. So, what do you think was, because it's interesting. I said this offline before we got on. Is I'm trying to figure out how you guys have been operating, and you came into our ecosystem. Or when I say our ecosystem, not like we're pioneers of any industry of any kind, but it's just coming in and seeing different faces and folks who have been doing it longer than we have. What did you notice? I know you mentioned they're very similar interchangeably, but what did you notice was a key fundamental difference when you came into our side of the house and you hear the word midterm rentals? What was the kind of thing that hit you where like, oh, this is very different, or actually this is very similar, or maybe it was a little bit of both?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just some terminology. Actually, I was speaking with Vivian this morning. We had a call. Speaking of your
Yeah.
School of Hard Knocks, yeah, we so I was kind of going over some of those terminologies that we're talking about the same things, but we might use a different word. Like the reverse arbitrage. I'd never heard that, so it took me a second to figure out what that meant. I call it, on-demand housing. Some people just call it matched leases. And I also heard people talking about at this midterm rental summit that we were discussing, where we met in person, was the relocation. When I hear relocation from the corporate housing side, I think of the relocation industry, where it's a corporate clients are relocating employees from one city to
Mm,
another. But relocation in this midterm rental segment is more talking about insurance, so the relocation counselors that are working with somebody that's displaced from their home. So we're all kind of talking about the same thing. We just might use a little bit different terms.
yeah. Tell me about what you saw, because when I think of, it's such an interesting conversation, because one of the fundamental differences that I noticed, and speaking of Vivian, I think she's tapping into this, and you can let me know, because I haven't been behind the scenes of like an organization like CHPA or anything of that nature. But when we would you say, if correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm completely asking here just to kind of understand what your understanding is would you say that the corporate housing first started in the apartment sector, and now some of these mom and pop operators are applying some of those principles on the single family side of the house? Is that an accurate kind of
I think,
way to paraphrase
yeah,
that?
yeah, I think that's fair to say. It's actually kind of timely. So Howard Ruby, who founded
Mhm.
Oakwood Worldwide, was kind of the kind of inventor of corporate housing. He actually just passed away within the last couple weeks.
Oh wow.
But he founded Oakwood in Southern California. He was a real estate investor, and then they started as furnished apartments, and he kind of like started it there and it expanded, and really was in the multifamily industry, the multifamily apartment communities. Traditionally, corporate housing has been that model, where it's just renting month-to-month rentals in apartment communities. There was always some one-offs here and there that you would, single family homes, but it was never a big piece of the puzzle. I would say post-COVID, in the last 5 or 6 years, have we really seen more of these operators getting in to do single-family homes in that format, so a month-to-month rental. So I think it's an accurate statement. I think that's what we're seeing more and more of, and some of these operators kind of hurdle both sides. So there's somebody that I met with today that's in corporate, is in the CHPA association, and then a lot of people I met at the Midterm Rental Summit are doing the same thing. They have single-family homes, and they're doing monthly rentals. They're just going about it in different associations.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, 'cause it's funny that you mentioned that, because the way I understood it, and it sounds like there's some partial truth to that, is this Oakwood, right? And you can enlighten me here. They first started in apartment complexes, right? And then that's how. I mean, is that tell us a little bit about that history? Like, what was was that where it all was Oakwood kind of like the first kind of pioneer in the temporary housing? Is that where these guys kind of lay the land as far as corporate housing goes, or was there other players as well involved as well?
And they would probably be considered the original, like the Howard Ruby is kind of, and I don't want to say invented. I'm sure there was people doing monthly rentals of some kind, but
Mhm.
nobody at that scale. Like nobody went to a scale that Oakwood went to, and that kind of standardized in every market throughout the U.S. and then globally.
What's the scale for context for someone who might not even understand what scale we're talking about here?
Well, at the heyday, I think Oakwood was probably 10, 15, 20,000 units. So, I think it was a pretty large operation.
And when you say 10 to 15, even possibly 20,000 units, help us understand in your world what that is. Is that controlling the units? Is that going after leases and taking on the risk? Is that on demand? Is that a combination? Because a lot of our world, when we first even started the show, we had a lot of multifamily syndicators who are buying these buildings and then doing traditional long-term rentals and increasing the value of the home, and then going back to the banks doing cash out refinance or whatever the case might be. So when we say 15 to 20,000 units, were these guys investors, or were they just operators who are just going out and securing other people's units? Or you tell us about that.
I think any operator that gets at that kind of scale, or even 1,000 units, 1,500 units, is probably
Mhm.
doing a mix. Like their inventory
Mm.
strategy is a mix. Like they may own some. Oakwood at the time they had a real estate division, and they owned assets, and they leased apartments, they did rental arbitrage, they did match leases, they rented from their partner network. It's a mix. I would say any operator at that size or any kind of at scale is probably going to have a mix of inventory.
Yeah. So Oakwood, from what I understand, and I think Elaine was telling me this, they ended up exiting, right? Is that right? Like,
Yeah.
how did that work out?
So I'm trying to get the dates right. So in the 2000 teens,
Uh,
Howard sold the interest of Oakwood to Mapletree, which is a Singaporean
mm,
investment company. They own now. That's actually the Oakwood brand is owned by Ascot, which is again kind of another Singaporean, very large asset-based real estate company. But they continue to manage that Oakwood. Mapletree managed the Oakwood brand in the U.S. all the way up till 2020. They
mm.
were trying some different models, franchising. We actually were a Oakwood franchise for a short time, and then in 2020 they decided to exit the U.S. market basically. And the Oakwood brand is still the service departments throughout Asia Pacific. It's a well-known brand, but that's a little bit different than from traditional corporate housing here. But was 2020 when they decided to exit the U.S. and kind of get out of the game.
That's so interesting. So tell us about your connection, right? Because I know you said you're a regional manager, executive stay in Oakwood Midwest. What does that mean to someone who doesn't even know? Right, we're all trying to figure out the terminology. We're talking about midterm. We're talking about reverse arbitrage. What is it that role would mean, and what is the association with Oakwood?
So we had an association with Oakwood. So let me kind of spin it back several
Yeah.
iterations here. When we were ExecuSay, we were a franchise partner with Marriott International. So back in the 2006-7 range is when we became a franchise partner with Marriott. So it was Marriott ExecuSay was the brand. So
Mm.
Marriott purchased the ExecuSay brand back in the early 2000s. And I can't remember the gentleman's name that runs National Corporate Housing. He was one of the owners of that. Anyways, so Marriott purchased the ExecuSay brand. They started doing corporate housing as a franchise model. So most of the operators were franchise operators, and that's what we were. So we were a franchise operator, and then Oakwood bought the ExecuSay brand from Marriott, and then decided to run that the ExecuSay as a franchise model. Then they decided to franchise some of the Oakwood markets. So that's where the association came from, is because we were kind of that transition from a Marriott franchise partner to a Oakwood franchise partner.
Wow. So
Kind of.
so when you say we, is that executive stay that you're referring to when you say
So
we?
Transitions Group, our company, our corporate housing company, before we were Vicinity, we were ExecuSay. We rebranded about 3 years ago. So
Mm.
we had been doing business as ExecuSay for 20 years almost. So that's
But
when I say we.
but it's the same founding members of Transitions Group, and you were just doing
Yeah. Yeah.
DBA, doing business as executive
We were
stay.
doing, we were doing business as ExecuSay. So if you roll prior to ExecuSay, we were actually suite options. So originally we had furniture
Wow.
options and suite options. Apartment options was like apartment locator service. So, but then our corporate housing division was suite options and Marriott ExecuSay, then ExecuSay, and then we rebranded 3 years ago to Vicinity.
Experiment Nation, you've heard me talk about how multiple investors across the nation are landing these lucrative midterm rental insurance contracts by making these small tweaks on the branding and marketing side, especially if you're an existing short term rental operator. There is a quick and easy shift that you can make with the ride guide in place. And because we've launched a 2-day boot camp that not everyone could attend in real time, I've put together a recording where you can get all the materials and all the guides to focus on rebranding either your short-term rental business or your current midterm rental business, so that you can actually have the insurance companies reach out to you. And then day 2 is if you want to actually play offense, how you can reach out to them by listing on the right platforms, etc. If you're looking to get this MTR bootcamp so that you can start optimizing and you can start receiving these lucrative contracts that again provide less headaches, less turnovers. Unlike the Airbnb space, you can start receiving inquiries today by having the right guide in place. So please go to experimentrealestate.com/MTR bootcamp or click the link in the bio to make sure you get your hands on this midterm rental insurance bootcamp to fast track your way into landing these lucrative insurance contracts the exact same ways multiple investors have taken advantage of this unknown and untapped niche within the midterm rental umbrella. What so I'm so curious. So I want to get into the franchising thing because I think that's so interesting. I love the idea of just, I always have conversations around, buying businesses. So buying businesses, I have partners exit theirs. So I always get fascinated because I think a lot of people are trying to start a business and when there's already a proven concept that exists out there. So that's a conversation I'm very passionate of. But let's just zoom back here, like zoom out a bit. I think you got introduced to our world, right? Our world being maybe your mom and pop, you own a single family, then you buy another one, now you're on five, then you got a dozen, and maybe you're leasing some of your own, and then maybe you're doing on-demand leasing as well. What do you see is the if you were to just kind of zoom out and say this could be your natural progression path, what do you think that looks like? Because I heard a lot of things and maybe your your company was a little bit different, but when you look back and see, if you're like, if you were to say, hey, okay, if you're an operator, this would probably be the next step, right? You've done single family, then maybe get yourself a building, and then if you get a building, maybe it's not even getting yourself a building, it's buying it, maybe it's just subleasing it, then you get into display, and then you get right, just trying to see that natural progression that I'm sure maybe is a common route that you see businesses growing in. I'm just very curious of what that path looks like. And then I want to get to potentially some franchising. What do you think that natural progression is
Yeah,
for someone?
I think it depends on what you want the destination to look like. Is
Mm,
it are you investing in real estate because that's you want to be able to cash flow that and at some point be able to step away and let that you know be your cash flow, uh, or is it you? Are you looking as a business? Do you want to like build something up and try to sell it? Like I can't. I think it depends on what you want that destination to be. Are you okay just running 5 units that's cash flowing? You're fine with that, and that's a
yeah.
nice little either side business or side hustle. So I think it kind of depends on what you want the destination to look like. Um, that's probably what I would say, because I mean, I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of different paths you can go. Like if you want to
There
scale, like
is.
there's a lot of different ways to scale. And but maybe you don't need to scale. Maybe you're fine doing 5, 10, 15 units. And maybe that's where you want to be, and versus getting to 150 or 1,000 units. What's the destination look like?
Yeah, that's such a good point, Gabriel, that I want to highlight because part of the reason when I started the show, I was, hey, real estate. Great. You're interested in real estate. Uh what kind of real estate? And it's like, do you want to flip? Do you want to do storage? Do you want to do temporary housing? Do you want to do wholesaling? Do you want to, and you should just see very quickly when you hear the word, oh, I want to get in real estate. The next thing is, why do you want to get into real estate? Right. And, there's the equity, there's the passive income, there's the cost segregation, there's the tax benefits. Like there's so many things you can go down, and I think what I'm going to do, I'm probably going to selfishly ask on behalf of my audience, because I think a lot of us get into real estate for first cash flow. And it's interesting because I recently, had a paradigm shift, or at least an operator who's very seasoned talk about how like you can get into cash flow. That's great, but the wealth that's built is built on the equity and the appreciation of your portfolio and asset. So let's just roll it back a bit and say, let's say you're looking for cash flow, right? I know cash flow is, you can cure a lot of growing pains, or maybe growth, or maybe get buying back your time, which I know was a theme from our conference with Dan Martell being there. So let's say you were going for cash flow. What is one thing that you think maybe this audience is not privy to? Because when you start talking about 100 leases, 1,000, etc., I don't think people really understand how much of a scaling thing that can be without even owning real estate. Do you want to talk about that a bit, about what that even means to say 100 contracts or 100 leases, or what does that even mean in your world?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, part of the reason that I went to this conference is I wanted to was we have a furniture rental business, and I wanted to kind of educate people to let them know this is a solution. If you want to scale, there's a
Mhm.
kind of an easy way to scale up, with it, being able to use furniture rental either as it's just an easy way to kind of get inventory going, or to take on-demand housing. Like there's opportunities out there that you're missing out on. Like, yes, you have 5 rental units that are cash flowing, that's great. But if you want to scale, here's an easy way to do it. So that was part of the reason that I had gone to that midterm rental summit, was to talk about that. I don't know if I've quite perfected that sales pitch yet, because I think I still got a lot of like glazed over looks. But I think there are some operators that are looking at some really big contracts, that are furniture rental makes a lot of sense, where if you want to do 300, 500, 900 doors, furniture rental could be a good solution for that. So I think that's like kind of looking at, um, I don't know where I kind of went off the question a little bit, but it was kind of what started me going down this path of trying to figure out what midterm rentals was, is because I wanted to see if there was an opportunity for us to get in front of this and show opportunities to scale in in a different way than probably what people are doing right now.
Yeah. Can you, because I think it's important that we highlight what that is. You said a few people, you kind of glazed over what you said. I want to make sure that doesn't happen here. Let's unpack that the process of how working with a company like yours can be helpful, but what that model even is, right? Because I think a lot of people are used to invest, but then you get to a point where you're kind of, you're cash strapped, or your debt to income becomes an issue, and either you're partnering with other people, etc. That's one lane that I think most people are listening to this are familiar with, and they kind of know where that story either begins or ends. uh, what's yours? Because I know you and I know, but how would you just simply define what it is that what problem are you actually solving, and how are you solving it, and then how we can plug in a furnished rental company like yourself to be able to expedite that plan?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I said, I'm vice president of sales. So I lead a sales team for both our corporate housing and furniture rental division. We are typically going after clients that have complex housing needs, whether that's, there are all these projects, where you see, there's a lot of mention at the Midterm Rental Summit, a 300 door project in San Diego. That's the stuff that we like to go after, because it's
Mhm.
complicated. It's hard. It's not like, we don't want to look for clients that have 1 or 2 or 3 needs, because they can find that online. It's Airbnb or it's Furnished. Like
Mhm.
there's plenty of opportunities for and stuff out there online. So we are typically going after complex housing needs, and sometimes we are working with other providers too to take care of where our furniture rental company can be a solution for them. Because if you're looking at some of these, a 500 door project, I mean, you might be talking $5 or $6 million in furniture and housewares that's going into that,
Mm.
where furniture rental can be a better solution from that, just because you can make that a little bit, and plus we can set that up into a net 30 model where you're getting paid before you're paying furniture rental. So there's just an easy way for us to make those, from a cash flow standpoint, being able to make those projects work.
Yeah.
So, um,
What kind of projects are there for someone who's listening? Because even the ones that I know of might be like, I know a few folks, right? FEMA got a large contract, and they gotta relocate 100 folks, right? But what are some of the ones you might be familiar with? Maybe it's the same, maybe it's different. Just so our
yeah,
audience might be like, oh wow, I didn't even know that was a thing. 300
yeah,
doors in one call.
yeah,
Yeah, it happens. So
yeah.
what is that? What are those
I mean,
projects?
government, military, those are obviously FEMA, stuff like that. So that's going to
Mhm.
be, you also see, I mean, military, you're going to see some bases. We did something several years ago in Jacksonville where they were refurbishing a naval base. There's stuff like that. But even just like intern business, we do pretty big intern projects. Like those are not long-term 5-year contracts, but those are, 3 months. But we'll house 200 or 300 interns in a summer, and those are just, we're setting up those units and shutting them down, and those
Who's
happen every summer.
who's footing that bill?
The corporate clients, yeah,
In
there's
You're talking
plenty.
about interns of like companies, like
Yeah,
tech companies,
yeah,
like
Fortune
construction.
500 companies. Yeah, yeah, they're bringing in, 100, 150, interns throughout the country. and they're looking for 8 to 12 weeks of temporary housing. That's when I talk about what we do. Our sales team, we're looking for complex housing needs like that, because you're like,
Yeah.
okay, that's you can't find that online. You're not going to go out somewhere and like, where do I find 100
Yeah.
Airbnb units? But that's what we do. We go out and try to find inventory that's all in adjacent apartment communities that are within maybe a half mile of each other, and we get them all set up, and then they stay there for 2 or 3 months, and then we shut them all down, and that works.
That's so interesting. And so, in your case, when you're networking, are you looking to, and maybe it's both sides, you let me know, are you looking to befriend those corporations and find out, hey, when's your next project? So that whoever you work with that sources, let us know and we'll pop in. Or the other way around, and it's like, hey, Ruben, you got any 300 door projects you're working on? I'm just so curious. How does that sales process and cycle? Who do you actually align yourself in as an alliance to get more business?
I mean, both. Like, a lot of times, like,
Yeah.
that's what I try my role to be, is where I'm trying to do both sides of that. Like, I'm working on corporate direct to corporate client business, but also partnering with people. Like I said, we have a furniture rental company. We're able to be a solution for other corporate housing companies that are maybe win a bid. We're like, great, we know how to do this because we already do corporate housing. We know exactly how to set up these units. We can do it quickly. So we partner with. So that's a lot of what I'm doing out there, is building relationships with other operators and showing them, like, "Hey, we can go into these together. If you want to like split, you do 150 of these doors and I'll do the other 150." It makes that operation a little bit easier. Like, we've done that before. Like, let's go in on a bid together, just because it's easier. Some of those really big contracts are easier to do as a team than try to do it all as on your own.
That's so interesting. So we had a Alana Weismark who came on uh our show a couple, probably 100 shows ago, and she owned a staging company. It was pretty interesting to hear the behind the scenes logistics of that. What does the logistics of 100 doors of furniture look like? Do you own this? Do you lease it? Do you have multiple storage facilities nationwide? What does that infrastructure look like on the back end to be able to move so quickly?
Yeah, so we mostly handle the Midwest down through Texas, kind of the middle strip of the country.
Mhm.
We have 12 warehouses throughout that territory. We have done some projects outside into other parts of the US, but those are typically like those big projects. If somebody has a big project, 100 units in a market, we'll just kind of drop ship that furniture. We'd buy furniture and drop ship it into that market and set it up. But yeah, I mean, all the furniture that we utilize is furniture that we purchased through our Furniture Options brand. Actually, we were just talking about this morning. I'm in Oklahoma City. There was the Moore tornado 12 years ago. It was a huge tornado that came through the Oklahoma City area, and we set up 250 units just for the insurance housing companies in over 3 or 4 weeks.
That's
And that's just
so.
I mean, like, it's a lot. When we get those sides of things, we are bringing in furniture from all the warehouses. Like, okay, let's bring them all into Oklahoma City, and we bring in resources from all those different warehouse locations. And we have a lot of long tenured employees, so they know the drill. They're like, okay, you're going to Oklahoma City, and you're going to be there for 3 or 4 weeks, and we're going to set up all these units. So
Wow. Do you
I'd
guys
love
work with third party? And sorry, go ahead.
No, we don't work with third party. I mean, everything. We're an employee-owned company, so we're an ESOP. So that's something that we really instill. Like, we really like all aspects of our business to be employee-owned. Like, everybody's an employee owner. Now, I'd be lying if I wouldn't say we've had to hire temp help from time to time when things come up. So that happens. But in general, we like to do everything. Um, Both corporate housing, furniture rental, everything, the whole vertical, we like to do with our own employees.
Wow, so you control that whole vertical. I can that seems to me like a logistics. I'm not gonna call it a nightmare. I'm gonna call it an opportunity. Because that's truly what it is. It's a need that you're taking off of someone else, and that's
And it
where the opportunity is, right?
Yeah, and it's not all it's the logistics on the front side, but also the reverse logistics. You set up all these units, you gotta be able to shut them down and take them out and do something with that furniture
Oh,
too. And so, like, sometimes when you talk to operators that are doing on these 300 door deals, keep in mind, what are you gonna do on the back end? If everybody moves out at the same time and you gotta shut down 300 doors, what's that look like? So again, that would be another solution that we can provide.
so I'm so curious, right? You talked about net 30, etc. and you can share as much as you want because we don't have to open up your whole books here. But um, uh, do you then have like a move in fee and a move out fee? Like, how do you structure it so that you also offset some kind of risk? Like, I'm just so curious of the behind the scenes of how you structure yourselves. Again, feel free to share as much as you want.
Yeah, our furniture rental company, we would do, it's an all-in price, so delivery and pickup are included, so it's just a one-time fee that you pay, so
Mhm.
it's delivery, setup, and then pickup on the back end.
Mm.
Our corporate housing side, we don't. We are all-in pricing, so we try to price everything. Here's our rate, and it's all upfront. So we don't try to do any like hidden fees. We roll just all of our cost into our daily rate.
Oh, and when you say that, that's for me. If when you say corporate housing, just so we're clear again, because we're
Yeah.
using different terminologies, that's like um,
If you were to rent my furnished units, yeah.
what was that?
If you were to rent our furnished units, our corporate housing units, yeah.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And so that's you're saying that's an all in fee?
Yeah. Yeah. We just quote
Yeah.
it out on a daily
Yeah.
rate, but then charge it monthly.
Daily rate. Okay, got it. And charge it monthly. That's so interesting. And would you do then? Do you do an upfront then of you pay in arrears or
It
pay in
depends on,
advance?
Yeah, it depends on who we're renting to.
Oh,
Like,
really?
yeah.
Okay,
So
interesting.
if we have preferred clients, we'll do a net 30 on, but if we don't have
Mm.
an agreement, we haven't worked with somebody before, we'd probably take payment up front.
That's so interesting. Wow, that is a fascinating. I mean, there's it's so interesting because within all the niches, there is another layer, right? Which is fascinating. Let me ask you personally. So, did this come? Which came first? Was it the corporate housing, or was it the furnishing? So, just so we can get that order right for
Yeah.
you,
So,
your personal
Yeah,
story.
so actually the founder of the company is Bill Jackson. So
Mhm.
1985, he started Furniture Options in Wichita, Kansas. So the furniture rental came first. So he started that, and somewhere along the line in the first couple of years, a corporate housing operator had reached out to him and be like, "Hey, I want to set up these units." And Bill was like, "What is this? What's this corporate housing world?" So he was a very inquisitive man. So he just apparently liked, and the guy sent him like, "Here's what we do," and he sent him like a standard operating procedure. Like, here's basically the blueprint of how to do corporate housing. So he decided in 1990 to roll out with Suite Options, a corporate housing company in Wichita, Kansas. And so it grew from there.
That's that's fascinating. And then now what's interesting is that you guys can probably double dip in the two entities, right? Like if let's say you're trying to, and I don't know if you still actively, and when I say you, is the transitions group still actively also sourcing? So let's say you might be sourcing for another 100 units. Now you can kind of go to your own secondary company and furnish it yourselves.
Yeah,
Is
all of
that
our
accurate?
yeah.
Yeah.
So where our markets are, our core inventory is all furnished by Furniture Options. So Vicinity rents from Furniture Options, and so yeah, we're
So
yeah.
that's awesome. And they're owned by the same individuals?
Transitions
Or
Group,
who?
yeah. So
Yeah.
Transitions Group is the parent company, and so Vicinity, Furniture Options, another little direct to consumer furniture rental piece, and our real estate division all rolls up into Transitions Group.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What do you see? I mean, you've seen the kind of the industry and how it's shifting. We've also seen a lot of remote work happen. We've seen COVID happen. What do you see? I want to see it from your lens of where the industry is going. Is this bulletproof? Do you feel like you guys need to, you know, get creative and start changing things, or is it more of like, no, Ruben, the same sauce works, continue to rinse and repeat? What do you see?
I feel like there's more volatility in the
Mm.
industry. I feel like so at the CHPA conference this year, the final session that they did, they had several leaders. So they had somebody from a relocation company, somebody from one of the furniture rental companies, the apartment association. So they had several like leaders in the industry kind of given their forecast. And this was, obviously shortly after the election, the new administration had just started. And so I think everybody at that time felt like, well, once we get all this figured out, it's probably going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're now halfway through the year and we're all still going, okay, once this is all figured out, what's going on with everything, it'll be okay. And so I don't know. I mean, I just feel like there's a lot more ups and downs right now. And I think and we saw, so I'll give you an example of that where I feel like the last 5 years since COVID, we saw obviously COVID, there was a lot of uncertainty. And then we kind of get into 21 and 22 and huge uptick in business. And a lot of that is because I think there was this pent up demand from relocation companies, especially global relocation into the US
Mhm.
had been waiting to get. And so we saw a huge spike in business in 21 and 22, and then it's kind of come back down the last couple years. But I think
Yeah.
this is coming back down to the new normal. I think this is where we're at right now is the new normal, and those were a little bit of outlier years. So I think that's where we're at. Like where we're at right now is kind of the new norm, but I don't know. Like we could see something change, and like if the economy goes south, or but I think everything's pointing in the right direction. I think hopefully we'll see interest rates eventually come down. We'll see
Yeah.
some real estate actions start kind of come off the bench. Um, so I think things. I mean, I think operators in general are doing well. I think they just need to kind of do the same thing, and I think the outlook looks good. I think there's some big projects out there that could be good for us next year, but there's still a lot of uncertainty out there.
Yeah, were you speaking on a particular sector? Because I know you guys cover a lot.
So when we
Um,
talk, yeah, so corporate housing in general, there's several different verticals, but the relocation piece. So again, when I say relocation, that's corporate client businesses. They're relocating an employee from one city to another city. That's a big vertical within corporate housing, and
mhm.
that's been soft the last couple of years. And I think that's for a number of reasons. One being the work from home, how that's affected us. I do think interest rates being high, a lot of people are sitting on 2 and 3% mortgages, and they don't want to move because they don't want to have to like go, get a new 7% mortgage. So I think
Mhm.
there's relocation in general has been down the last couple of years, and that's one of the verticals that's pretty strong in the corporate housing industry. The government obviously has
Oh
typically
yeah.
been a good piece of business, and this has not been a good year for anybody doing government business.
No.
Um, so yeah, and I don't know what that's going to look like going forward. But it's just that uncertainty is like, are we going to see some of those government projects maybe not take off? That people are bidding on
Yeah.
right now that like maybe get pushed. I don't know, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I think those two pieces, government and relocation, those verticals within corporate housing, are a little soft right now.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your how often do you see like the insurance housing niche? Because I know that's kind of where my interest is. And it's funny when you mentioned
Yeah.
government, because I was just with Noble Crawford and in Dallas in his neck of the woods, and that's where he's made a great living for himself in that niche. But what do you think? Do you think the insurance housing is that like a novelty? Is that very prevalent? Like, how have you seen that sector when we talk about sectors over the years do?
So it's interesting for again, kind of we have two different divisions that it affects. So our
Yeah.
furniture rental company does a lot of business with insurance housing companies. So it's a
Mhm.
big piece of our business. So we're pretty in tune with that vertical. Our corporate housing division also works with those companies. It's not as a big as a percentage of our business on the corporate housing side. It's a good piece, but furniture rental, it's a really important piece of our portfolio.
What have you seen? Are you seeing that staying consistent, or do you think has it been consistent, or is it also
It
been
has.
volatile?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it has. It's been pretty good. Like we have not seen our revenue at least has remained steady.
Mhm.
And I've had conversations with some of the insurance housing companies because I've been like, hey, I was just at this midterm rental summit. And everybody here is talking about they're working with companies like yourself. Like, do you see like more of your business shifting to that? And the answer that I've gotten so far is no. Like they're always looking at different opportunities, but part of work, doing the inventory on their own, where they pick, they go out and find the inventory and they rent the furniture, is selling. Like they're part of their brand, like their brand identity. Like if you
Yeah.
kind of do away with that, then like kind of what are you? So the business has been consistent for us for furniture rental, and I'm hoping it stays the same. I don't. I mean, I think there's always going to be a segment that we'll see.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've heard on, and maybe it's always been that way, but they have specific relocation specialists, right? And again, on the insurance side,
Yep.
that specifically are dedicated, or even search specialists that are dedicated to finding homes that are unfurnished so that they can work with companies like you and continue to keep that book of business going as well. Which, so I don't know if that's more of a shift, or that was always the case, or it's more of like they're trying to recorrect and say, hey, kind of like what you said is, this is a big part of our business and we must continue to look for these kind of options rather than finding those turnkey homes. And so I'm selfishly asking the same questions you're asking to
Yep.
see
Yep.
how I need to adjust
I
myself.
mean, they've always done them. We've had a long
Mhm.
term, several of the large insurance housing companies. Our furniture rental company has worked with them for decades. So
Decades.
yeah, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's been something that they've done. Yeah. So I think it probably it tips one way or the other, but I think it always kind of comes back to a little bit of an equilibrium.
Yeah. Which I think is good for the both of us,
Yeah, I think
to say
so.
the very least.
Yeah.
Um, that's interesting. Wow, it's so interesting because there's so many different moving pieces to this, and the thing that it fundamentally goes back to your question as to what is it that you want, and being very, uh, you know, narrow focused on that. Part of the way I see it for most of the listeners is, um, why not be able to have your cake and eat it too, right? I think you guys are kind of a good model in that sense, where there's the furnisher options, and then there's our transitions group that does corporate housing, and then there's kind of a vertical integration there. And so um, I'm going to go back to that question because I'm curious. Your rare season, I think, kind of it puts a whole bow on this entire discussion that we had. If you are, and again, there's no right or wrong here, so not putting you on the spot. I just want to see. I'm always so
Yep.
intrigued to see how other people think. If you were, hey, I want to get uh into a business that creates a lot of cash flow. I don't have to own, I can definitely control, and then I want to deploy that capital into secured assets. Right now, if you are starting in 2025, uh, because we said there's so many sectors, what would be, with what you know today, a sector where you would feel you would limit the amount of risk, but at the same time also increase your amount of upside? Loaded question, I know, but I'm curious as to where your mind would go first based on what you've seen.
I mean, if we want to go to back to insurance, that insurance housing piece, like you can do that. Our furniture company, we work with companies that do a pretty much a no risk model where they get the request and they go find an unfurnished home and then they rent from us and it's a match lease and they just you know they take that. They're basically risk free in that setup and they're cash flowing that. So that's an opportunity that I think operators could be utilizing. It's like, yes, you have your existing assets, but you could also add additional cash flow just by doing that model. I think there's potential there. I think working, obviously, I'm always going to pitch CHPA because I think there's a lot of operators. I think it's a great association. Like I'm always a fan of that. We've been involved with CHPA ever since it started. And I think I don't know if people necessarily know that there are corporate housing companies out there that they don't carry inventory. They just work with their supplier network, that they're just working with partners out there. And so it's a lot like Airbnb. Like so they're working, some of these corporate housing agencies are working with some of the largest companies in the world to provide their temporary housing globally. So getting associated with some of those companies would be another way to kind of your once you make that partnership, there's an opportunity to get business from some of the largest companies in the world. So if you want to get some business from the Fortune 500 company that's right across from the street from some of your rentals, that might be a way to get some easy revenue. I won't say easy revenue, but there's an opportunity
Hmm.
to get some business that you may not be able to get directly yourself.
So just so I'm clear on that, because I think that was a gem that I want to make sure doesn't slip through the cracks. What you're saying, and kind of going back to what you said, is match leasing is is my new term, where you're saying there's a lot of members in at CHPA, CHPA, right? Is that the same thing?
It's chip. Yeah, CHPA.
Or
You can
okay,
call it chip. A lot of
CHPA.
people. Yes, it's the term
I
that
didn't know
people
if it
like
was
to use.
different,
Same.
or if this
Yep.
interchange.
Yep.
It's the same. Okay, cool. So
Yep.
let's go CHPA. You're saying, I heard you say supplier network, and that's kind of a new language. So I just want to make sure I understand that before you kind of wrap up. What's a supplier network, and how does one get access to that or partner with that? Just so we're super clear what you mean by supplier network.
Yeah. So an agency, like a large company that just works with a supplier network, what they're doing is they're renting somebody's furnished unit. From that furnished unit, they will add on whatever their margin is, and then they supply that to the client. So they are renting somebody else's unit, and that's the way that they procure all their inventory. There's also companies that do a mixed model of that. Like we would be an example of that, where we have our own inventory, our own supply. So, but if somebody needed something in California, we don't have any inventory there. We would reach out to some companies that our supply chain or our network that we know. It's just companies that we know do a good job, that we vetted, and that so we will rent that unit from that operator, mark it up a little bit, and pass it on to our customer. So there's a lot of that renting between one another within CHPA, and so that's why I think that would be good for people to look at, is that association has the opportunity to kind of be a bigger organization than just themselves.
That's great. So it's in other words, there's some great relationships that
Yep.
people have a great quality, or at least you would think they're part of that organization, and it behooves you to foster those relationships so that when you do have a demand that you can't supply, you go to your supplier network, which
Yeah.
are the folks who are part of those organizations. Is
Yeah,
that right?
and I think any association, whether it's CHPA or kind of this midterm
Mhm.
rental, association of people, it's the networks. That's really what the value of it is. Whether
Mhm.
it's you're going to like be a supply chain network partner, or you just ask what you need somebody like, how do you find a good housekeeper, or how do you do this? Like
Yeah.
maybe making those connections and leveraging that is the value of being in those associations, because
Mm.
it'll pay for it 10 times over, just because the network, the networking that you make, those connections that you make, whether it's renting from one another or learning how to be the best operator.
Yeah, totally. So I want to put a bow on this. You mentioned word franchise, and I want to come back to that, right? Because I think there's some value in that. But tell us how the franchise model, right? You talk about Marriott buying executive stay. Do you see the franchise model come up often in this industry? And if so, why? And
Not
if not,
so
why not?
much. Yeah. We were a franchise partner, and I think obviously Marriott was very familiar with the franchise model. They're like very asset light. But I don't know if that's something. I don't see a whole lot of franchise operators in the corporate housing industry right now. I can only think of a couple that kind of, there's definitely a lot more. I'm trying to think what the Sonder partnership with Marriott is. It's a licensing agreement, and then they're
Mm,
getting access. So Sonder is a short-term rental operator that's been around for, I don't know, a decade now. And they have partnered with Marriott. They're on Marriott.com,
mm,
and they pay a licensing fee to be on there. So I think there's things like that that you might see more versus like a true franchise agreement, where typically when you're in a franchise agreement, you get a certain territory. Like when we were with a Marriott franchise, we were assigned this territory. So
mm,
they would funnel leads to us, but we basically were kind of, this is your market, and you can't do business as executive stay in other territories.
mm,
But Marriott, the reason why you become a franchise partner is somebody's going to drive revenue to you, or drive opportunities into your funnel.
right.
And if you can find an operator like Marriott, then that might make sense. If it's somebody else, it may not make sense, but you have to look at the numbers.
Yeah. Do they typically do a ref split by like daily rate or something like that? Is that what they would do, or is it like a contract? Like, how do you think they structure those licensing agreements from your experience?
Yeah, and the franchise agreement was a percentage of revenue. So yeah, it's and that's like if you're a hotel operator, it's that there's a one time upfront cost, and then basically moving forward, it's a percentage of your average daily rate or whatever. It's percentage of revenue.
It's interesting. So many layers. It's like an onion. Well, thank you for bringing this full circle. I trust that, um, you are certainly. I think there's some. Here's what I said, right? And I think I might have mentioned this on um the School of Hard Knocks meetup that we put together. I do believe there's a lot of operators, and it goes back to the 80-20 rule, right? There's going to be, 20% of the operators who are getting 80% of the business. And I do feel like there's a lot of fast growing companies, including we're putting ourselves in that bucket where I think collaboration is key And I think it behooves us to partner with companies like yours as we grow in scale and as we come across opportunities to have those partners and make those partners now. Because it is a relationship-based business. I don't. What's the advice that you would say? That's my key takeaway, anyways. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Like Ruben, nope, that's wrong. It's not relationships. It's these whatever it is. I think that's it. But what would you say to part before we part ways? Is if someone's looking to get into this space and gain traction quickly? I think you gave some of it with CHPA, but what would you say is the biggest kind of maybe oversight that someone might not really think, and maybe it's obvious, maybe it's not, that you would give as advice as to really grow some deep roots into this space?
No, I agree. I think it's relationships, networking, finding those partners that you can work with and you can ask questions, like whether
Mhm.
it's operations or revenue, like being able to, and it, I like, yes, I definitely talk about CHBA a lot, but I've made lifelong friends. There's people there
Yeah.
that I'm going to, when I retire, I'm still going to be friends with. So that's what you need to be looking for, is people that you can have honest conversations with.
Mm,
And kind of depending where you're at in maybe your career or whatever, find a mentor, find somebody that you can reach out to people and tell me how to do this. Like, don't be
mhm,
afraid to reach out to people. Like, how have you done this?
mhm,
Most people, I think, will give you a general idea. They may not sit down and give you 3 hours of their time, but they're willing to
mhm.
give you, in general, I would be willing to give pretty much anybody 15 minutes of my time. Like, if
Yeah,
you want to have a call with me, I'm happy to jump on a call with almost anybody.
yeah,
At some point, I'm going to have to limit that, or I'm going to have to charge you for that. And that typically weeds out the who really wants to invest in this and who doesn't.
yeah.
But find a mentor, find somebody that you can really pick their brain and figure out the best practices.
Awesome. Who was that for you, by the way?
So actually, I have had a couple mentors. Obviously, the founder of our company, Bill Jackson, he was just a great
Yeah.
entrepreneur. Kathy Bachman is somebody that was, when we were partners with franchise with Marriott, I actually got to
Mhm.
know her well. And then just a lot of people in my own organization and through CHPA, a lot of people that I've learned a lot from over the years.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. And respectfully, I again appreciate you giving us a full hour here of your time. I cannot wait to continue to send business your way. That's for sure. We're like 1 degree of separation away at this point now. I know I said three when I started the call, but I feel like it's also fascinating to understand. You can only do business with people once you understand truly how they do business, and I really appreciate it kind of unpacking the background of Transitions Group and how the vertical integration and how you guys are looking to continuously grow in Kansas and then more with more partners. So yeah, thank
Yes.
you, Gabriel, for coming on the show. And I trust that you'll capture some of that OKC energy. And it sounds like you're rooting for them to take it to the ship. So let's see how that turns out in game one tonight.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. Thank you for having me.
Experimentation, I believe there are two critical components that will help you achieve your goals very quickly and succeed. Number one, it's information like this that you received on a show, in an episode, and content that you can find on my YouTube channel or anybody's channel. And then there's a community. And the way we've been able to expedite our process, the way people in our community, people that we consult, mastermind members, whoever, they get the information on an episode like this, but then they also have a support, whether it's me guiding them or being guided through a community. There is an opportunity for you listening to be able to expedite your process or even expedite your results that you're seeking by being part of the community. If that is what you're interested in, we at Experiment Nation happen to have a community devoted to helping maximize your occupancy and your profitability altogether, regardless of which market that you are in. And for that reason, you have an opportunity where you can go to experimentrealestate.com/submit if you're looking to work in an environment that can help you prosper faster. Call out any areas that you might not be familiar in, especially the blind spots. That's where a guide comes in hand, and I would be a pleasure and honored to be your guide. But in order to make sure you're a good fit, make sure you go to experimentrealestate.com/submit so that my team can go ahead and take it and see if you're a good fit to join the mastermind and the multiple programs that we have. In addition to that, I'm also now a YouTube partner, which means that I want to give you more access to information, more access to Q&As, more access to the questions that actually come out of our mastermind that help people expedite the process. We've seen people get anywhere from $4,000 to $5,000 to $6,000 to even $7,000 a month net on just one door by applying the strategies that we use by working with corporations and furnished accommodation in a very strategic way. So if you're interested, make sure you also subscribe, because I'm going to have different tiers that's on YouTube now that we've become YouTube partner, to continue to be the bridge to your success in your lab. And your lab means your life, your goals, or wherever you're trying to head. So make sure you also hit the subscribe button on my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/real estate experiment. We'll be there. You can also look us up at Midterm Rental Insurance Experiment. We will be there. Make sure you hit the subscribe, because that's when you'll know the tiers that are available to you that make sense for you, your marketplace, for your results. Remember, you're only one experiment away. Let's build.